Right now, in this moment, you are not seeing reality. You are seeing a story your nervous system constructed. And the gap between those two things is where your entire life is being filtered, without your knowledge and without your consent. This isn't a philosophical thought experiment. This is happening to you right now as you watch this. Every experience you've ever had, every person you've ever met, every moment that felt completely real and immediate, all of it arrived already shaped, already divided into me and world before you even had a chance to question it. And here's what makes that unsettling. It doesn't feel like a filter. It feels normal. The ancient Gnostics understood this, not as abstract theology, not as cosmic mythology, but as a precise diagnosis of how human perception actually works. They had a word for what exists beneath all that filtering, the undivided ground before perception splits everything apart. They called it the monad. But the monad isn't God in the way most people imagine. It isn't distant. It isn't somewhere else. It's what reality looks like before your mind fractures it into pieces. So the real question isn't whether true reality exists. The question is, what is standing between you and it right now? Because something is. And once you see the mechanism clearly, you'll understand why reality has always felt just out of reach, even while you were standing inside it. The Gnostics spoke of the monad as the unknowable source, not because it is intentionally concealed, but because it precedes all division. It is beyond form, beyond hierarchy, beyond any structure that divides reality into separate parts. Anything you can observe, describe, or define already belongs to separation. The monad comes before that split. It isn't something inside reality. It's what makes reality possible in the first place. Texts such as the Apocryphon of John describe the monad as ineffable, immeasurable light, not light as a physical glow, but as undivided fullness. From that fullness, emanation unfolds. Layers of reality emerge, structures form, and consciousness begins to separate. But something subtle happens in that unfolding. The movement from unity into many forms isn't the issue. The real issue is when awareness begins to identify with those forms. Structure becomes identity. Identity becomes perception, and perception becomes reality. This is where misunderstanding begins. The monad never withdrew. Awareness simply became entangled in its own structures. Gnostic cosmology dramatizes this through myth, through stories of emanations, errors, and rulers. But those stories are describing something happening inside you. Imagine looking into a mirror and slowly forgetting that you are the one standing before it. Over time, the reflection becomes your reference point. You adjust to it, you defend it, you build a life around it, and eventually, the reflection feels like you. This doesn't mean nothing is real. It simply means that awareness has confused the reflection for the source. The monad isn't hidden behind a wall. It exists before the mirror ever appears. It is the undivided field before reflection fragments into self and world. And that changes the question completely. The question is not, how do I travel upward to reach the monad? The real question is, why do I experience reality through fragmentation in the first place? Because fragmentation creates filters. Filters create interpretation. Interpretation creates the sense of separation. And separation, once stabilized, feels normal. By the time you say, "This is the world," you are already looking through layers of inherited perception, biological, cultural, psychological. You do not start with neutral, pure awareness and then build structure. You inherit structure and call it neutral. So when the Gnostics spoke of ignorance, they didn't mean stupidity. They meant something far more subtle. They meant living inside a structure you've never questioned. Seeing through a lens that feels so natural, you don't even realize it's there. The monad isn't something far away that you have to reach. It's what was always here before perception split apart. And if that's true, then the issue isn't about the monad's perceived absence. It's about structure, the quiet framework shaping how reality appears. The first mechanism is not belief, not philosophy, but identification. From the moment you became self-aware, everything began to feel like it was happening to someone. A narrative followed, a boundary appeared between me and not me. But that feeling of identification is precisely what makes it powerful. You did not consciously design this sense of me. It emerged gradually through memory, language, reinforcement, comparison. At some point, experience stopped being a continuous field and became my experience. And once that shift happens, everything reorganizes around it. When perception contracts into identity, everything is interpreted relative to that identity. Experience is no longer direct. It is processed through protection, preference, memory, anticipation, and self-preservation. You don't simply see. You compare, you measure, you interpret. Even neutral events are filtered through subtle questions. What does this mean for me? Does this support me? Does this threaten me? Does this confirm the story I carry about myself? This constant referencing of experience back to a constructed self creates distortion, not because identity is evil, but because it is partial. Identity selects, it excludes, it organizes reality around continuity of self. The monad represents undivided awareness. Identity represents localized awareness. And this isn't a flaw. Having a sense of me is useful. It lets you move through the world. It lets you relate, remember, plan. Without it, you couldn't function. But there's a catch. Imagine white light passing through a prism. The prism does not destroy the light. It refracts it and separates it into colors. Each color is real, but none of them are the fullness. Your identity is that prism. The moment you start experiencing yourself as me, everything divides. There's you, and then there's the world. The field fractures into subject and object. That split is subtle, but it shapes everything. You begin to experience reality as something happening to you, rather than something arising within a unified field of awareness. Control becomes central, and narrative becomes central. And once that sense of self settles in, the split feels normal. This is the first reason you've never seen true reality. Perception is filtered through separation. And here's the crucial part. This filtering isn't something you choose. It's automatic. You don't wake up and decide to fragment perception. It happens in the background. Language reinforces it. Culture reinforces it. Survival instincts reinforce it. Even spiritual seeking can reinforce it. I am the one trying to awaken. The self may wear a different mask, but it's still the one running the story. The Gnostics described ignorance not as lack of information, but as misidentification. It's not that you lack knowledge of the monad. It's that perception is organized around a contracted self that cannot perceive beyond itself. As long as awareness is tightly identified with the narrative self, reality will appear fragmented. The world will feel external, other people will feel separate, and meaning will feel conditional. You are not failing to see true reality because it is hidden somewhere else. It's about the way you're seeing. This sense of identity is only the first layer. Even if it softens, something deeper is still shaping perception. And once you see what's shaping perception beneath identity, the whole framework shifts, and what the Gnostics called the monad no longer feels abstract. Even if identification begins to loosen, perception is still shaped by something deeper than personal identity. The second mechanism is structural conditioning, the architecture of interpretation itself. Before you form beliefs, before you adopt a personality, your nervous system is already organizing experience. It filters by contrast. It distinguishes threat from safety. It categorizes sound, color, movement. The brain predicts what it expects to see before the eyes fully register it. You do not experience raw reality first and then interpret it. You experience interpretation immediately. Even modern neuroscience points to something similar. Perception is predictive. The mind doesn't wait passively for the world to appear. It's constantly anticipating, filling in gaps, shaping what you see before you even notice it. What you call reality is always filtered through that process, shaped as much by expectation as by raw sensation. The Gnostics described this in symbolic language. They spoke of rulers, archons, forces that govern perception. Not necessarily beings floating somewhere above the sky, but forces that shape how reality shows up for you. Patterns that keep the world feeling solid, familiar, continuous. These structures create consistency, but they also limit what can be seen. They define what counts as possible. They define what feels real and what the mind is allowed to register. Anything that doesn't match the mind's expectations gets brushed aside, called imagination, coincidence, or mistake. Not because it isn't real, but because it doesn't fit what you already believe. So even if identity loosens, even if the narrative self becomes quiet, perception still runs through inherited structures, cultural assumptions, language categories, and conceptual boundaries. You don't just see a tree. You see tree, a word, a label, a mental compression of something far more intricate than the word allows. And this applies to everything, including yourself. You don't experience undivided being. You experience me, world, time, object, and other. And this is where the mechanism deepens. Time itself becomes part of the split. Reality starts to feel like movement, past behind you, future ahead of you, and a narrow strip called now in between. But notice something subtle. That sequencing is also constructed. Your system quietly links one moment to the next. It turns fragments into flow. It creates a sense of past and future, so the person in the middle feels steady. Without that stitching of time, the sense of you wouldn't hold together. Time, as you experience it, isn't just duration. It turns moments into sequence. It stretches experience into before and after, creating distance where there might otherwise be continuity. But the monad isn't limited by that structure. Undivided awareness is not experienced as moving from past to future. It is the condition within which those movements are perceived. As long as you're seeing through division, through categories, through past and future, reality will keep feeling split. The sense of me draws a line between you and the world. Conditioning turns what you see into categories, and time stretches everything into past and future. Together, this creates the feeling of a world made up of separate things, moving through separate moments. And within that structure, the real reality can't be seen, not because it's hidden somewhere else, but because the lens itself keeps splitting what it looks at. As long as you're seeing through separation, through labels, through past and future, everything will feel divided. And when everything feels divided, wholeness becomes impossible to recognize. Think about conflict. When someone disagrees with you, the structure immediately activates. There is me with my position and them with theirs. Memory pulls up past experiences. Conditioning categorizes the situation as threat or validation, and time projects possible outcomes. Within seconds, reality feels divided. But notice what actually happened before the story formed. There was simply a sound, a tone of voice, a set of words, and then structure moved in to organize it. The division didn't come from the event itself. It came from the way perception assembled it. And that assembly happened so quickly, it feels like reality itself. So the question shifts. If identity bends perception, if conditioning fills it with patterns, if time stretches it into before and after, how do you see without that constant splitting? The answer to that question is where access to the monad begins. If identification is the prism, conditioning is the grid, and time is the sequence that stabilizes fragmentation, then access to the monad is not about adding something new. It's about loosening what has been narrowing perception all along. This is where people misunderstand. They imagine that seeing true reality must involve something dramatic, a breakthrough, or a transcendent experience. But if the monad is undivided ground, then access isn't escalation, it's simplification. It's what remains when the extra tension relaxes. There's something subtle in your experience that points to this. Before a thought fully forms, before inner commentary begins, before memory compares or anticipation projects, there is a brief contact where experience occurs without narrative. The mind organizes it almost instantly. But every now and then, you catch the organizing in motion. A reaction appears and almost immediately becomes my reaction. A thought arises and just as quickly becomes I think. An experience passes and it becomes earlier. Something is anticipated and it becomes later. Identity localizes, conditioning labels, time stretches. And yet all of that unfolds within something that doesn't seem to stretch with it. Awareness itself doesn't age. It doesn't divide into inside and outside, and it doesn't move from past to future. Those movements happen within it. That's the shift. Not suppressing thought, not escaping the world, just recognizing the difference between what appears and the space in which it appears. The contents change, but the field doesn't. The more you try to grasp undivided reality as something to obtain, the more division returns. Seeking can quietly become another movement of identity, another attempt at control. You don't need to dismantle your life. You don't need to reject language or culture. You don't need to erase the self. You begin to notice that experience is happening within a field that isn't fractured, even if its contents are. And when attention rests there, even briefly, something begins to quietly shift. The world doesn't feel quite so over there. Experience doesn't feel entirely like it's happening to you. This is why access to the monad has always been hidden in plain sight, because the mind keeps searching for something elsewhere, while the undivided ground is the condition of every moment. And this is what Jesus points to in the Gospel of Thomas when he says, "If those who lead you say, 'See, the kingdom is in the sky,' then the birds will precede you. If they say, 'It is in the sea,' then the fish will precede you. Rather, the kingdom is inside of you, and it is outside of you. Not somewhere else, not later, not beyond the world, but already present. It isn't hidden by distance, it's obscured by division. Even now, as you're listening, notice the awareness in which these words appear. Not the meaning, the awareness itself. Does it move through time? Or do time and movement appear within it? When perception rests more as field than fragment, the sense of confrontation softens. Reality feels less divided, not because the world has changed, but because the structure through which it's filtered loosens. If this perspective resonates, and you want to explore how these structures shape your daily experience in a deeper way, I've created a free ebook called Escaping the Illusion, a Gnostic guide to mastering reality. It expands on these ideas and walks through the subtle mechanics of perception in a practical, grounded way. You can download it completely free. The link is in the description. You are never separate from reality. You've just been seeing it through structure. First, the sense of me narrowed everything into a center, a story through which experience was filtered. Then conditioning shaped that experience into categories, inside and outside, self and world. None of that is a mistake. It's by design. What the Gnostics called the monad isn't a distant deity somewhere beyond the sky. It's the undivided ground that was here before perception split things apart. And that ground never went anywhere. You didn't miss reality because you're unworthy or uninformed. You've just been looking through a divided lens. When the prism relaxes, light doesn't have to travel. When the grid softens, nothing needs to rearrange itself. When identification loosens, awareness doesn't become something new. It simply recognizes what was already here. So the real question was never, how do I reach the monad? It is, what in your perception keeps dividing what is already whole? that isn't answered by belief. It's answered by noticing, by allowing attention to see structure without fighting it, and by resting as the field rather than the fragment. And the more gently you notice, the more ordinary it becomes. Not dramatic, not explosive, just a quiet shift in how reality is felt. The sense of distance softens. The need to reach dissolves. What seemed hidden reveals itself as immediate. Even sensing that briefly changes something. You're no longer searching from a distance. You're already inside what you were looking for. If this resonates and you'd like to continue on these journeys, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the Gnostic Eye so you never miss our weekly uploads. And if you want something physical to remind you of these ideas, sacred art, symbolic pieces, and Gnostic-inspired works, you can explore the Gnostic Eye Store. The link is in the pinned comment below. Because the monad isn't something to grasp. It's what's already here before grasping begins.